The aviation market is expected to grow significantly in the coming decades. Please share your insight on the future of aviation market.
Yes, this is true that in the next 20 years the passenger traffic in the global aviation market is going to double. And this creates a lot of new opportunities for the industry, such as new possibilities for the employment, new jobs will be created, new connections will be created among the countries and the cities. It will definitely help the economical growth of many countries, such as Latvia, for example. We have experienced that already before. However, this also has a negative impact. This negative impact could be seen in other ways, such as the skies. We see that the capacity of the air traffic control is getting more and more limited. So the skies are getting more congested. So it's a need to see what can we do there in terms of generating additional capacity. Additional, let's say, factor that has to be looked at is the capacity of the airport infrastructure. Especially as there are a lot of limitations how the government can support the airport development. And these limitations do not allow the governments to invest in the airports, especially in those airports that have grown over 5 million passengers. So it means that the airport themselves have to finance this infrastructure. And in many cases, especially in Europe, because of the quite high competition among the airports and the pressure from the airlines for the airports to keep their costs down, it's not easy for the airports to invest in additional capacity, especially if you need to build a new runway or a new airport terminal. Moreover, there is a struggle for the private investors that have already privatized the airports or that have a concession agreement for a certain period of time to make an additional investment if the period of the agreement is short. The remaining period of agreement is limited. A small example, so if you have a 30 years concession agreement for operating an airport and you have 10 years left and the government is asking you, and the people actually, and the airlines are asking you to invest in another runway, this investment might not pay back over the remaining 10 years of time. So these are the issues that needs to be addressed in order the air traffic to be able to grow in the next 20 years.
Okay, thank you. And we know that aviation is a key driver of global economic development, but what kind of economic impact aviation has on the countries and the countries' regions inside?
Yeah. Well, we can see that there is a direct impact of an aviation industry on the regional development. We see that the more connections your airport has, direct connections, the more the passengers are more inclined to choose to fly to your country, because passengers choose to fly point to point more than, let's say, flying in transfer. Additionally, the same is for the business people. If, for example, a large company wants to establish a headquarters in one of the countries, and this is an international company, they will be more inclined to choose the country with more connectivity between this country and other countries in the world. So this has a lot of direct impact and also indirect. So if you have a strong aviation industry in your country, strong airports, strong carriers, good connectivity, then it means that, as I mentioned, that the hotel industry is benefiting, the tourism industry is benefiting, the business is benefiting. So for example, in Latvia, we see that the total direct and indirect impact on the GDP of a country is more than 3%. So this is a lot. This is more than the whole budget of, let's say, the defense budget of our state. So in case the connectivity drops, it has a negative impact on economical growth as well.
Okay, thank you. How creating of alliances affect the market share in today's competitive marketplace?
Well, it's a trend in the world. We live in a global world, despite of many trade wars which are happening nowadays. But still, the trend is that the alliances win over, let's say, being alone. And we see this specifically in, we specifically see this in the airline industry, and especially in the United States. We see that the big companies, the big airlines in the United States have merged over the past 10 years. And the number of airlines which are serving the domestic market in the United States, for example, is limited already. On the contrary, in Europe, there are hundreds of airlines which are serving the market, which is even smaller than the aviation market of the United States. So it will not happen, this will not continue for long. There will definitely be new mergers in the airline market in Europe. And it's very important for, let's say, the medium-sized and small carriers to look for the bigger strategic partners. Otherwise, they will go out of the market or they will be bought by some bigger airlines. So it's important for the smaller airlines and medium-sized airlines to look for those partners already now. And the same factor is not only important only for the airline market. The same is for all the markets. The same is, for example, for the duty-free market, the retail market at the airport. Well, we see that the e-commerce is affecting the duty-free market. So the duty-free market over the years globally is decreasing. So there's a new possibilities of the alliances and cooperations in this segment. So that, for example, the airport could become the place where you pick up your goods, which are ordered online. If the airports are not, let's say, pursuing these trends, then, well, unfortunately, this market segment could decrease from airports and have a negative effect on airport revenues.
Okay, thank you. How airports market positioning impacts consumer attraction?
What we are doing at Riga Airport, we are open to different consumer segments. In terms of airlines, we are handling both the full service carriers, and we know what they are looking for. They are looking for reliable infrastructure, good service to their clients. At the same time, we have the low-cost carriers, which are also looking into the reliable infrastructure. But for them, I would say the functionality of operations, the speed of operations is an essence. So if you look at our infrastructure, it's adapted to both to handle the full service carriers and low-cost carriers. The same is in regards to passenger needs. We have the low-cost carrier passengers and the full service carrier passengers. So we have a perfect business lounge. We have a nice VIP terminal for the, let's say, for the high-end passengers. We are now in the VIP terminal, so, which is being used by that segment of passengers. At the same time, we have the services which are more important for the low-cost carriers and their customers. We have,
Thank you. Да, они потом будут мотивировать. Would you please share your opinion on low-cost airports? Do you think that they look economically beneficial?
Well, I've written my master thesis about the low-cost airports. The low-cost airport was a big trend, I would say, 10 years ago. And why was it so? It was because the low-cost carriers was looking at many options how to optimize their costs. And one of the costs, the major costs, are the airport charges. So obviously, if you cannot negotiate lower airport charges with the bigger airports, the low-cost carriers start to look at the regional, smaller airports. And it was a good niche for the smaller regional airports to exploit, to grow the traffic to their regions. So the secondary airports, former military airports, were converted to serve the low-cost carriers. They were able to offer the much lower airport charges because the infrastructure that was being used there was not, let's say, as good as at the larger airports. At some moment, the difference between the low-cost carriers and the legacy carriers was diminished, especially on the short-haul routes, because the legacy carriers saw that in terms of to be competitive against the low-cost carriers, they also have to cut some of their costs, especially on the service quality. And let's say the legacy airports, if I can say, call them like this, they saw that if they want to keep both the low-cost carriers and the legacy carriers as their customers, they have to be more cost competitive themselves. So they were forced to lower the airport charges. And I see that the difference in terms of airport charges amongst the low-cost airports and the other airports is not so significant anymore. So the low-cost carriers are more, let's say, inclined to stay at the bigger airports than to look for the options to go to the low-cost airports. So, and what we see already is that at the regional, let's say, low-cost airports, the passenger traffic is decreasing. The other driver of let's say, the motivator for the low-cost carriers to go to the primary airports is the need to attract the business travelers. Because at some point, the low-cost carrier, let's say the niche market, the niche consumer segment, which were the travelers that were looking for the cheap tickets, this market was already exploited. So knowing that for the short-haul flights, the business travels are also not so picky anymore. They can fly easily on Wizz Air, EasyJet, Ryanair, Norwegian, because it's only 1 hour, 1.5 hour flight or 2 hour flight. You don't need to have a high-end service for that. But what the business travelers are really looking into is the overall journey time, including the journey to an airport. So usually the primary airports are located much closer to the capital cities, to economical centers of the regions. So this is why the low-cost carriers, if the difference between the airport charges is not big, are more inclined to choose the primary airports, so that the business traffic and the business passengers won't spend too much time driving to an airport. So they will have this competitive advantage to attract the business travelers. And this is why, for example, EasyJet is so happy to be at the Gatwick airport. This is their primary hub. And the same is with Ryanair. Even Ryanair is not only looking at the secondary airports anymore, they want to fly to the primary airports. And this is what they're doing.
Thank you for the insight. And the last question, would you please give a piece of advice to the students that would choose aviation management for their master's studies?
Well, I see that, and you mentioned this already, that the aviation traffic will grow significantly over the next 20 years. And this will create new opportunities not only for those employees who are working who will be working into the operations of the airlines and airport, but also there will be a need for the good managers. You cannot replace the good managers with the software or with the robots. So there will be a need for the good managers. And if you want to be a good manager, you have to study aviation. It's not easy to switch your industry if you are into the downtown retail. It's not easy to switch to an aviation industry. You must have some knowledge base. You can get this base of knowledge by working in the aviation industry. This is one, but it will take some time. But if you want to speed up the process and be competitive from the first day, you have to study aviation.
Thank you so much.